Good morning, everyone. I'm Jim Silkenat, a member of the Board of Directors of the World Justice Project. I want to welcome you to our World Justice Challenge Finalist Showcase. This is my favorite part of the forum, and I'm really glad that you could join us here today for this discussion. The World Justice Challenge 2022 is a global competition to identify, recognize, and promote good practices and high impact projects and policies that protect and advance the rule of law. This year's challenge is dedicated to recognizing projects that address structural inequities and governance weaknesses exacerbated by COVID-19. Applicants were invited to submit a project for consideration in one of three categories: access to justice, anti-corruption and open government, and equal rights and non-discrimination. The World Justice Project received over 300 applications representing 118 different countries. This group was narrowed down to 30 finalists who have joined us here at the forum. 5 of these projects will win a $20,000 cash prize, which will be awarded at the forum closing plenary tomorrow. There are 10 finalists in the equal rights and non-discrimination category. 5 of those projects will present their specific projects here in this showcase this morning. Now, with regard to the equal rights and non-discrimination category, COVID-19 has weakened human rights protections and worsened structural discrimination globally. I think the pandemic has exposed and exacerbated economic inequities, healthcare disparities, and gaps in access to education. It's taken a disproportionate toll on women and girls, on migrants, on ethnic and racial minorities, and other marginalized groups around the world. The 5 projects that you'll hear about this morning make significant advances towards countering these negative trends and in strengthening equal rights and protections and dismantling systemic inequities. From my perspective, all of these finalists deserve an award, and I hope that the World Justice Project can find a way, if not to present a direct award to all of them, to provide help in finding other funding from other sources, and that's one of our goals at the end of this forum. Our showcase agenda, the procedures this morning will be as follows. Each finalist will give an 8-minute presentation, and we'll try to keep it just to those 8 minutes. And then we will follow that with, after each of those presentations, with a 30-minute moderated discussion with each of the project representatives. And I'm hoping we may have time for questions from the audience, but we'll see on that. Let us move now to our first project presentation this morning, and that is the International Legal Foundation project from Nepal. In Nepal, courts impose fines as punishment for really minor petty offenses. And if no payment is made, then jail time is involved for the person involved. This project works to eliminate the use of debtor prisons for children in Nepal, and our presentation will be made by Ajay and Jennifer Smith. Please.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Oh, yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Smith, and I am the Executive Director of the International Legal Foundation, and this is my colleague.
Hi, namaste, and good morning to everyone. I am Ajay Sankarja, advocate, working with the Public Defender Society of Nepal in the capacity of Executive Director. Thank you.
The International Legal Foundation was founded 20 years ago to address the global crisis in access to legal aid. Every day, millions of men, women, and children are held in detention centers around the world because they cannot afford a lawyer to defend them. Our mission is to make justice a reality by fighting to guarantee high-quality legal representation for everyone arrested or detained. In 2008, the ILF set up the first legal aid offices in Nepal dedicated solely to defending the poor accused. Case by case, we worked not only to transform our clients' lives, but ensure the law as written was realized in practice by litigating rights violations all the way to the Supreme Court. Very early on, my colleague Ajay distinguished himself as an extraordinary advocate and soon took over leading this project. And in 2017, we spun off this project into the All Nepal-led Public Defender Society of Nepal. In our work in Nepal and around the world, we see every day the criminalization of poverty and status that is locking people up, not for what they have done, but because of who they are. International human rights law, and indeed the national constitutions of most countries, set forth that all are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the laws. Yet everywhere there exists a two-tier system of justice that exploits poor and marginalized communities. Of particular concern for this project is the existence of debtors' prisons, or the jailing of people for non-payment of court-imposed fines and fees. When people are unable to afford to pay these fines that the courts imposed, often for very petty offenses, including begging in public, disorderly conduct, or petty theft offenses, they experience devastating consequences, including years of incarceration that makes it even harder to find employment, housing, and to meet other basic needs, and feeding a vicious cycle of poverty. In Nepal, even young children are not exempted from fines and fees, despite the fact that they have no income of their own. Moreover, criminal fines and fees fall disproportionately on lower caste and indigenous communities, in particular the Dalit and Janjati communities, who already face severe barriers imposed by systemic racism.
Okay, so I would like to share the story of the child who caused us to launch this campaign in Nepal to eliminate divorce prisons. We will call him Ram to protect his privacy. I met Ram at the Juvenile Correction Home, Nepalganj, a city in the south area of Nepal, located near the border to India. It was at the time high of the COVID-19, and I was going from detention to detention center, looking for the children that I could help get out and send them to their parents. That is when I met with Ram. I was shocked to find out that though he had only been sentenced at just 16 years old to 30 days in jail and a fine for a petty theft offense, he had been in detention more than 3 years. Because he could not afford to pay the fine, so was forced to walk it off in detention. There could not be a more tragic example of how the justice system is failing our children. I immediately filed a habeas corpus petition in the Supreme Court, arguing that Ram's detention was illegal, as at the time I had found him, the law had been changed, reducing the maximum time someone could pay to failure the fine. I got Ram released, but I cannot give him back those 3 years of his childhood and had spent in jail or repair the damage to his future family and the community. I knew that unfortunately, if Ram had been treated this way by the justice system, other children were suffering as well. So we launched a project to survey every children in 8 correction homes across the nation, and the results were alarming. 78% belong to marginalized ethical and religious communities. 93% of them fine imposed is not in capacity to pay the fine. 40% reported that not represented by the council. 86% not informed of right to counsel. So we knew that we can say to take action to address this issue on a national scale.
So this project, like all of the ILF's work, was meant to create real systems change. And just quickly, we created an action plan that looked at a multifaceted approach to address the issue. Ajay has talked about the litigation that he engaged in, but more than that, we want to change the laws. So the goal is to work on policy advocacy to really push the government to change these laws, and to do that, to engage citizens themselves, to engage impacted individuals and communities in calling for the government to repeal these laws. We created a system of peer exchange where lawyers from around the world who have similar laws worked with our Nepal lawyers to share strategies that worked. Ajay and his team brought habeas corpus petitions, and then ultimately brought a legal action in court to challenge the constitutionality of the law. And we have now launched a people-led campaign to call for the reform of these laws.
And our project is already having an impact. We have secured the release of 45 children from the detentions. The Nepal lawyers have received 25 hours of expert mentorship. We invited by the Supreme Court to file public interest litigation against the fine and discriminatory law, which falls under the jurisdiction of the Constitutional Bench, and the show-cause order is already issued.
So this is not just an issue in Nepal. Growing attention is being placed on this idea that people are being criminalized, not for what they've done, but because of who they are. The UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty has called for the immediate repeal of all laws criminalizing life-sustaining activities, and until they're repealed, has made clear that non-payment of fines should never lead to prison sentence. If we win this award, we will use this platform to expand this campaign to ensure that debtors' prisons are eliminated, not just in Nepal, but to create a regional campaign. And as a next step, also call it the international level for governments to address this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very impressive project. Our second project this morning is the Documenta Project from Mexico. This project operates in Mexico City with a multidisciplinary team of professionals who serve as justice facilitators. Their role consists of identifying barriers within the criminal process for persons with disabilities and suggests appropriate procedural accommodations in each of those individual cases. The presentation this morning will be made by Diana Scheinbaum.
Probably some of you are wondering what I've just said. Not being able to communicate or understand is not only frustrating, it reduces the chances for participation in society. Making accommodations is at the core of the Justice Facilitator work. Today I want to share with you the road we have traveled seeking to reduce barriers and discrimination for persons with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities in the criminal justice system in Mexico. And I want to do that through the stories of the people we've met. We've met Arturo in 2011. Arturo has a psychosocial and intellectual disability, and he was accused of stealing a car. When his mother got to the police station, she told the officers that Arturo didn't know how to drive. And the police changed the story and said that Arturo wasn't stealing the car by driving it, but by pushing it. At no point during the detention, or the criminal procedure, Arturo was able to understand the accusation, to communicate with his lawyer, to give his own testimony, or even to know his rights. There were no accommodations or supports. The authorities were speaking to him like in sign language, and he was completely left out of the process because he wasn't able to understand. Arturo spent more than 4 years in a psychiatric jail. Over the years, we've met many defendants like Arturo, and we've also met victims, such as Olivia. Olivia is a woman with an intellectual disability who was sexually abused by a family member. And when she tried to report her, the prosecutor said that she couldn't do it due to his intellectual disability. He needed her guardian to be with her and testified on her behalf. But her guardian was her father and probably the abuser, and he never showed up. So Olivia had never the right to be heard by a judge, and her perpetrator never faced the consequence of his acts. These encounters between the criminal justice system and persons with intellectual and psychosocial disability tell the story of discrimination and unequal treatment. And these encounters are very relevant because they're frequent. The UN Rapporteur on the Rights of Persons with Disability just reported that in many countries, more than 50% of the prison populations are persons with disability. So taking that into account, at Documenta, we knew we had to do something about that. It wasn't enough just to pinpoint the obstacles and barriers faced by persons with disability. We had to create alternatives, innovate, create a solution to ensure equal participation in the justice system. And that was when we came up and we found our answer in the concept of procedural accommodations. So persons with disability have the same rights as anyone else, but they might need adjustments, modifications and supports to have access in the same equal rights as anyone else. Imagine, for example, being a wheelchair user and trying to go to a police station that is on the second floor without an elevator. Or imagine being a victim or a defendant with a disability, right? Being deaf and or having a sign language interpreter. So accommodations make this justice system accessible. Accommodations are diverse by nature. They're based on the needs and context of each individual. And they entail from simplifying complex questions in a courtroom, changing the way the courtroom is set up, asking for frequent breaks, among many, many others. So once we knew that, we had to understand who could implement those accommodations. There was nothing in the system. And we came up with the idea of training a group of justice facilitators, a multidisciplinary team, whose role is to be impartial and neutral professionals, trained to identify barriers in the system and to implement procedural accommodations for each case. Let me tell you a couple of stories or examples of how Justice Facilitator works. So a couple of months ago, we were asked to go to a criminal hearing and support a man called Jose with an intellectual disability who had been raped. When we arrived at the hearing, we realized that Jose could only communicate by gestures, right? He didn't have no speech. The forensic psychologist at the hearing told the judge that he should dismiss Jose's testimony because he couldn't communicate, right? And we asked the judge to let Jose tell his story using every resource he had. So at that point, Jose stood up in the criminal hearing and acted out what had happened to him. And for everyone in the courtroom, it was very clear what Jose had experienced. We met also Oyuki a couple of years ago, and Oyuki was detained immediately after throwing herself and her 6-year-old boy to the train tracks. When she arrived at the courtroom, she was completely shocked. She was hyperventilating. She couldn't articulate any words. And the justice facilitator had to work to ensure that Oyuki was able to focus, to reduce her anxiety, and that she understood the importance of her participation. So Oyuki was finally able to tell her story, to give her evidence, and when she talked, she related the story of many, many decades of violence and abuse against her. She told the story about the anguish she had suffered, not being able to provide for her and for her child, and also the lack of support of her family. And that story was really taken into consideration by the judge during the ruling. So over the years, we have accompanied many, many cases of persons with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities. We have been present in more than 3,000 hearings, and we have supported 700 of men and women with disabilities and many other justice officials. And we've learned many lessons. I want to share some of them with you. First, that change is possible even when we have limited resources, such as in Mexico. Second, that to tackle discrimination in the justice system and everywhere, we need to address the stigma and the prejudice, right, that are on the base of discrimination. So the justice facilitators make a huge difference, realizing that the participation of persons with disability is something that could happen, and that generates empathy in judges, prosecutors, and defendants. Third, that sometimes law reform is not enough. We had to do innovative, day-to-day interventions that change the practices inside the system. And finally, we've also learned that we're not alone. We have met over the years more than 13 similar programs all over the world, and we're working together to create new tools to promote the use or mainstream the use of justice facilitators around the world. So the responsibility to build just, accessible, and inclusive communities, it's on everyone's shoulder. And I would really like to invite that you ask yourself what is being done in your own country to ensure access to justice of persons with disability and to promote the use of these mechanisms to ensure access for all, because the lives, the rights, and the freedom of persons with disability matters. Thank you very much.
Diana, thank you for that. Our third project is the Inreach Project, which is a global project. This project is probably the world's first and only tech resource for LGBTQ plus people fleeing persecution. Since starting in 2016, Inreach's free web and mobile resource platform has made 140,000 plus assessment connections for this community. It's currently available in the US, Canada, and Mexico, and the presentation this morning will be made by Jaime Scarro. Jaime.
Thank you. So my name is Jamie Scarrow. I'm the co-founder and executive director at Inreach, formerly Assam Connect. We're from the United States, but we have a global user base, and we match LGBTQ people fleeing persecution with safe legal aid and support through free technology. Inreach is the world's first tech platform matching LGBTQ people with safe, verified resources. So I co-founded this organization when it was first called Assam Connect. And I met my good friend in my senior year in college who was seeking LGBTQ asylum at that time and told me about his own personal experience coming to America as a young gay immigrant and really struggling to know where it was safe to go for help, from everything from pro bono legal representation for his LGBTQ asylum claim, but also for critical medical, mental health, education, and social services to rebuild his life in America. As a trans man from a conservative environment, this cause really resonated with me, and we saw this potential to not just help LGBTQ people seeking asylum, but also other LGBTQ people in need. So our platform is currently available in all 50 US states and DC, US territories, Canada, and Mexico, and we're available as a free website and native mobile apps. So we started Inreach because there was no holistic technologically advanced platform for LGBTQ people in need of safe resources. So we saw technology as really the first and only scalable way to fill this critical information gap, whether you need legal support, educational support, mental health, medical aid, and other critical social services. So this is the user story of Sarah, who it's not her real name, but she fled Nigeria due to death threats because of her trans identity. She entered the United States as an undocumented immigrant, and she had never heard of asylum before she was referred to our free tech by her friend. So Sarah uses our free app to connect with a pro bono attorney with expertise serving LGBTQ people fleeing persecution. She's also able to access a free support group specifically for trans women of color and connect with free affirming doctor and therapist to support her during her transition. As an undocumented immigrant, Sarah appreciates the app's ability to filter out service providers that require documentation that she might not have access to. The result is that Sarah's able to rebuild her life successfully in America. She's able to not have to go back to Nigeria where she would face life-threatening persecution, and she's able to finally live authentically as a trans woman. So since launching in 2016, our free app has made over 140,000 matches between LGBTQ people fleeing persecution like Sarah and independently verified direct service providers. As you can see, 2021 almost doubled our user sessions from 2020, and actually this year we've already surpassed this number as we really see an increase in demand for what we do. So actually a couple of days ago, Assam Connect became Inreach. So we decided to become Inreach because in addition to serving LGBTQ Assam seekers, we've seen our platform be used by a wide range of LGBTQ people. So for instance, during the Trump administration, we saw more instances like Sarah, undocumented LGBTQ immigrants or LGBTQ people seeking immigration relief in addition to just seeking asylum. During the pandemic, we saw more young people experiencing homelessness due to their identity and international LGBTQ students who couldn't return home because it wasn't safe. And then even myself, a year and a half ago, when I began my transition, I used our app to find free legal, medical, and mental health services to support me and to become the trans man that I am today. So our work is also in the context of 2022, becoming the year of the most anti-LGBTQ legislation in the United States. I think the United States is typically looked at as a beacon of hope for LGBTQ people around the world because in over 80 countries it remains illegal or fundamentally unsafe to live openly as an LGBTQ person. However, it's important to recognize that LGBTQ rights, specifically trans rights, have been under attack in America for the last several years. For example, this year so far, over 300 bills have been introduced in state legislators across the country, targeting the trans community specifically. Poverty continues to be an LGBTQ issue as well in America, and homelessness continues to be disproportionately impacting trans and gay youth. So we're looking for more support to accelerate the world's first technologically advanced platform for the LGBTQ plus community as the demand for our technology grows and our cause becomes even more urgent. So we hope to improve the platform by adding new service categories and search filtering for specific community needs, from the intersex community to the HIV/AIDS community, and many more diverse LGBTQ communities within our overall community. We also hope to add new native translations. Our app's currently available in native English with over 100 languages available via Google Translate, but we hope to add native Spanish, French, Arabic, and Russian to further improve the accessibility of our app. And we also hope to strengthen our service provider verification process. A big differentiating factor of what we do is we have trained volunteers who independently verify each provider to be accessible and welcoming to LGBTQ people fleeing persecution before they're actually listed in our app. We also re-verify each provider at least once every 6 months to maximize safety. So with more funding and support, we can increase the frequency and the nuance of how we verify providers to make sure the data is always accurate, but also always safe. In addition, we hope to add new programs to advance our free tech platform. For instance, the Inreach Community Fellowship will provide employment specifically to Black trans women who continue to face disproportionate murder rates and poverty in America to help us expand and spread awareness about our free app in their local communities. As a trans-led organization, it's very important to us to uplift those who are among the most marginalized of our community. Our vision overall is to ensure through free technology that safe help is in reach for all members of the LGBTQ plus community. As someone who's used the platform, I believe that everyone deserves the freedom and safety to live authentically, and that's really what we stand for. Thank you.
Thank you for that. It's a particularly important set of issues in the United States, and I'm glad it's being addressed so seriously. Our fourth project this morning is the Racist Violence Recording Network project from Greece. This project is a coalition of 51 different agencies that provide medical, social, and legal aid to victims of hate crimes. The presentation this morning is by Gary Falia. Yes, please.
Good morning. Thank you, James. It's my first time here, and I am thrilled on being part of this amazing and very interesting forum. So, RVRN, the Racist Violence Recording Network, was established in 2011 by UNHCR in Greece and the Greek National Commission for Human Rights, based on two findings back then: the identified absence of an official and effective system for monitoring hate crimes in Greece, and therefore the need for the civil society's organizations to be coordinated in order to proceed with the recording of the relevant incidents. RVRN was started its operation with 18 civil society organizations. Today, RVRN is comprised of 52 non-governmental organizations and civil society bodies. In order to understand why a collective response was necessary in 2011, let's go back then and see the elements. We observe the increase and the escalation of xenophobia and racist violence, particularly the organized racist violence, and as it was proved later by a neo-Nazi political party in Greece, Golden Dawn. The fact that we didn't have an official and effective reporting system for hate crimes led to the deprivation of victims' access to justice and supporting services as well as protection. As you understand, this led to the increase of the insecurity for victims' communities and also the lack of trust to the institution, but also it sent a clear message of impunity to perpetrators. On the other hand, the fact that civil society organizations in Greece did not have a common methodology on recording these incidents of racist violence did not allow us to document and prove the increase that we have observed. So, it seems that a network was not only necessary, but also the appropriate framework for giving solutions on the identified problems, meaning that it could ensure complementarity of structures and functions of the participants. Thus, while RVRN members remain part of a collective initiative for promoting advocacy on hate crime, at the same time, RVRN members keep their independence. Also, it was in the mandate of UNHCR, but also the Greek National Commission for Human Rights to act like that, while the capacity of the NGOs to have direct contact with the victims ensured that we would have access to the needed information through a transparent and comprehensive way. Of course, we share common aims, like comprehensive indications on qualitative and quantitative trends, recommendations to authorities based on international, European, and national law, information sharing, and public awareness. In order to achieve these aims, we share also common tools and procedures, like clear objectives and tools, common agreement on definitions, rules, obligations, and rights, common methodology on recording the incidents, as I mentioned before, development of a license with other stakeholders in order to promote our recommendations to the authorities, internal and external capacity building on recognizing hate crimes and supporting the victims. Particularly for the purposes of RVRN, the definition of an incident of racist violence is based on the relevant national framework, because today, given that we finally have an official data collection system, we are able to exchange data with the authorities and compare this data. The incidents are recorded exclusively based on the victims' testimonies. All our recorders are trained on our methodology, and we also try to record information connected with bias motivation, the type of the crime. We proceed with the profiling of both the victims and the perpetrators, and at the end of the recording, we always request from the victim to let us know whether she will proceed with submitting a complaint. In the case of a positive answer, we evaluate, we assess the victim's needs, and we provide the relevant services. In the case of refusal, as you understand, we map the reasons because they are strongly connected with the anti-reporting phenomenon. Let me give you an example of our work. Here we can see the data analysis of the status of the perpetrators between 2019 and 2020. What we can observe is the increase of violence, racist violence, by law enforcement officials. It's a worrying trend, and as we understand, it is not obvious that the authorities will accept this trend. So what we do, we go back to our data, we do the same analysis from 2012, and we can see that this is not the first time that we face this problem, and it is not occasional. It starts from 2018, and let me tell you that this increase is further during 2021. So it is also connected with the pandemic period that we know that the police has an enhanced role on monitoring the measures of the movement. Of course, we face challenges in terms of victim situation. Victims many times prefer silence instead of going through the traumatized experience again. We also face challenges in member capacity. We discuss for overwhelmed colleagues in the field trying to keep balance. I will not say any more about that. I'm pretty sure that everybody understands what I mean. And of course, we face challenges in terms of victim support since our services are project-based and they can end with the ending of funding. How we overcome these challenges? Coordination and strong collaboration. And our achievements. The last 10 years, we managed to document more than 1,300 incidents. We disseminated 10 annual reports with our trends. Also, our reliability is recognized by UN agencies, but also European bodies. Institutional recognition for RVRN is reflected on its participation on the National Council Against Racism in Greece, but also in the agreement for cooperation addressing hate crime with ODIHR, the Greek state, and the Greek justice system. Golden Dawn, the neo-Nazi political party, was convicted at the end of 2020, while other individual perpetrators were brought to justice. We believe also that we contribute on the empowerment of the communities because we bring the victim's voice in front of the authorities. Thank you.
Thank you for that excellent presentation. Our fifth and final project this morning is the Red Dot Foundation's project from India. This project aims to make cities safer by encouraging access to public and private spaces for everyone, particularly women, through the use of crowdsourced data, community engagement, and institutional accountability. Presentation will be made this morning by Elsa Marie da Silva.
About 10 years ago, a young woman, Jyoti Singh, was traveling by bus in Delhi. And on that bus, she was gang raped multiple times and then left to die on the streets. Now, that incident made national news as well as international news. At the time, I was working in the corporate sector in aviation, and I was looking for my purpose. This incident really made me reflect on my own experiences of sexual violence and harassment on public streets, in public transportation, and even at the workplace. I was emotionally triggered to remember all those incidents, and for the first time, I realized that my friends and I had many stories to share, which until then, none of us had even spoken to each other about it. So, sexual harassment and violence is not an India problem alone. Just a couple of days back, as I was walking to the opening reception, right in front of my hotel, two young boys on their cycles shouted at me, "Show me your boobies." Now, this is harassment. I don't deserve that. I don't deserve it as a visitor to this country. The global statistics are that 1 in 3 women around the world on an average experience sexual assault or violence in some form or the other, at least once in their lifetime. And unfortunately, because of the systems that we have and low trust in them, 80% or more do not officially report these incidents. And in India, for example, the National Crime Research Bureau says that the statistics indicate that every 15 minutes, somewhere in India, a woman is raped. Now, sexual violence is a spectrum of abuse ranging from non-verbal forms of it at one end, like staring, ogling, to verbal forms, catcalling, commenting, sexual invites, and physical forms, which are touching, groping, stalking, sexual assault, rape, and maybe murder. Now, often, most of these are trivialized, normalized, and we take it as part of our daily routine, which numbs us. But in fact, if we dig deeper, we would realize how much it affects our physical and mental well-being, limiting our movements, our mobility, our opportunities, and how much we restrict ourselves. So my solution immediately after the gang rape of Jyoti Singh was to launch Safe City, a crowd map for sexual and gender-based violence. Here, we encourage anonymous documentation of these personal incidents, either from the survivor themselves or as a witness to these incidents. And this is a global application on the web as well as mobile on Android and iOS. The idea is to make visible what is currently invisible, show the extent of the problem, look at patterns and trends at the hyper-local level, that is your street level. You can zoom in and look at this data. This data is not what reaches the police station. You will never get it in your official records. And unfortunately, in India, we don't have open data where you can look at the crime data in your own city, in your own community. You will get high-level statistics. So how does it work? It's very simple. It's a very simple form meant not to intimidate. We ask you for your age and gender, what happened to you, where did it happen, the day of week, the time of day. And this is intended to triangulate this information so that we can make sense of it and understand what's happening at your own location. How have we used it? For individuals, we want them to make better choices for their safety, not to be afraid to walk down a public street or take public transport, but to be fully aware of what could happen and then have strategies to deal with it. Often as victims, we feel we are alone. Often we are made to believe that it is our fault. We were in the wrong place at the wrong time. We were wearing the wrong clothing. We were the cause of it. But knowing that there are others like us who've experienced it, we've noticed gives courage to the victim to come forward, seek help, which is the first step in the healing process. Then we are all part of communities. What is the role of a community in making sure that we are safe? For example, in India, we have laws that protect our rights, and all the examples of verbal, non-verbal, and physical forms of sexual harassment actually have corresponding Indian penal codes. But the awareness of, one, the spectrum of abuse and the legal remedies are not, accessible to people. People are not aware of it. And so they cannot access their justice systems. Plus, there's low trust with the police. But with this data set, you can go to your community and demand for accountability. We have several instances where young women have approached their community elders and have demanded for safe public spaces. That has resulted in them being able to stay outside beyond 7 p.m. We know life doesn't stop at 7 p.m. You can take up extracurricular activities, you can take up a job, and you can even just be in a public space and enjoy the weather, for example, or chat with your friends. But that, in reality, is not available to all. We also have public toilets that keep popping up on the map as hotspots. And these public toilets are not just a public toilet. For many women, especially in some parts of the country, it is the only toilet that they have. They don't have a toilet at home. And if that toilet doesn't have doors, windows, or proper lighting, then can you imagine the stress she goes through when accessing that public amenity? And if there are men hanging around commenting and taking videos and pictures without permission, that even adds to the stress, making them vulnerable. So we have used this data to engage with civic authorities to fix these public amenities, street lighting, as well as encouraging police to increase their vigilance. And all of this has translated into greater trust and dialogue within the community, as well as between the community and institutions like police, civic authorities, and even transport officials. So we are a low-tech solution, but you can't just put a tech platform out there. We believe in community engagement. This app not only collects the data and gives people a voice, but it also gives the data back as an open source format where they can use it to engage their institutional service providers. So we are the largest crowd map for sexual and gender-based violence in the world. We have several community partners, not only in India, but around the world. Our latest countries this year have been Croatia and Romania. We are now working on an Arabic version, and we will be adding Spanish and Portuguese. So we are looking for more collaborators around the world. All the other 4 solutions before mine can be, great partners for us. We document sexual violence because currently that data gap exists, and we are trying to bridge it. So if you believe that everybody should have the right to a city, a safe space, to walk down a street without feeling harassed, without feeling intimidated, and should be able to live a equitable, inclusive, safe, and just life, please get in touch. Thank you.
Well, those were 5 really excellent presentations. What I'd like to do now is invite our panelists to join me up here in front, and we'll have some discussion and questions and answers for each of them. So I have a few questions, and what I'd like to do, if it's okay with everyone, is to just raise the questions and have each of you respond down the line. That reduces the likelihood that I'll forget somebody and mess this up. So first question is sort of an easy one. What was the most effective and impactful strategy that your project used, and what was the biggest hurdle that you had to overcome?
Okay, thank you. So, as I said before, I think that our advantage is the fact that all of us, all the RVRN members with the coordinators, decided to adapt and serve the same methodology on recording the hate crimes, and at the same time to provide a holistic support to hate crime victims. Regarding the challenges, I think that I already mentioned the main factors. I think that our main enemy is the anti-reporting phenomenon, the fact that hate crime victims have already passed through a very traumatic procedures. They don't know why, because let's remember that they are targeted for reasons, for characteristics that we should never ask them to change or hide, and therefore many times they prefer to hide their trauma, to hide the incident instead of speak about that. So it's very important to empower them in order to be ready to speak, even more to submit an official complaint. Thank you.
So the biggest challenge for me has been getting people to report. It is a deeply traumatic experience, and even if the crowd map is anonymous and crowdsourced, yet people are reluctant to do so. So how have we addressed it? And that's part of the success story, is really partnering with nonprofits on the ground that already have trust in communities and helping them understand how the data set can be used in their existing work to make that systemic change happen. Because with the data, you have power. You can sit as an equal with the police, local police, and say, I want greater vigilance, or I want budgets released for women's safety with your elected representatives, because you have data that cannot be disputed. If you went with your own story, they could have probably dismissed it, saying you were the cause of it. But when you can show a pattern and trend occurring, they cannot dispute it. And the other one is working with young people. They are early adopters of technology, but they are also in the age group that experiences it the most. And therefore, we have worked with them on helping them think through how to make their college campuses safe, but also their transport to and from home and to the college and back safe.
Let me follow up on that just for a second. How do you advertise the availability of this service? How do you reach others to let them know that it exists? I can imagine large parts of the community would not be aware of it otherwise.
So we are a nonprofit. We don't have marketing budgets like corporations. So it takes a lot of speaking like this, a lot of social media marketing, and we use data challenges with young people. So at any given point in time when we run a data challenge, we have 100 young people participating, and then they have to talk to 10 other people. So we run these constantly, and that's how we've got so much of data.
Great. Please.
For me? Yes, thank you. So what a strategy ILF and PDS Nepal has used in this project. Firstly, I agree with our colleagues that the data. We interviewed all correction homes. We only have the 80 correction homes for the 300 individual, but there are more than the thousands people young people are detained. So we need to figure out how many people have which kind of the problem. So we interviewed each one. So that was the one tool to collect the data. Same times, data can be used in the many way that we show that data to the stakeholders that this is the problem with the justice system, that the poor people or marginalized people is facing. They are just doing a wrong because the child, in every family we have the child. Every time we notice that our child is doing something wrong, but we are making them in prison, which make their individual capacity or improvement be destroyed. Because if you sending them for the long term in a failure of the fine, that means you are making their school be end or something. So that we loving to the government, that is the problem. Same time we face litigate the issues, because policy reformation is the one thing, but what we do for the individual, that need to be addressed. He should be or she should be get remedy. So we filed a writ of habeas corpus as a litigation. So that is another. The bigger thing what we did, because that was in the COVID highest time, And we cannot move everywhere. We cannot have access to the every detention center. And we located in the Kathmandu, and across the country, we have to collect all information. So we built a student network. So the student who is studying with a law faculty or other, we openly called PDS Nepal Student Network is going to announce who is willing to volunteer. Please be part of the student network. And what the sense behind is that the student is going to lead the future legal, I mean, they will be going to act as a law enforcement agency or the judges or something. Few of the students were selected for the interview project because we want them to know, to experience when you talk with the juveniles or the child, what you are facing. So that was, indirectly, we make them feel, oh, you have to care in the future about this. Same time, we send to the students, to the community, because without a community to understand what kind of the discrimination you faced, or what kind of discrimination you are the victim of the discrimination, you cannot do anything. So the community education is also a good tool we used by our own lawyers, by the law students. So these are the main tools we use to get this project achieved. Yeah.
I can see how that would work quite well in the largest city, in the capital city. But are you able to reach rural communities, the smaller towns around the country too, or is that a problem?
Yeah, we able to reach some communities. But as this is focused, I told that the students from the local across the country, they are able to go to the community. Same time, what we do that, we use the social media. So when we filed any writ of habeas corpus or any decision or order come from the Supreme Court or the Annual Court, we publish this publicly. So that the lawyers, I already present that 25 lawyers were well trained. So they started to communicate with us. Oh, this happened how you communicate, how you convince the court to do this. And we make them to, oh, this is the way you have to convince the court. So we use that.
Great, thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you. Well, regarding effective strategy, I would say that we work in a double track strategy, right? So the first thing was to really understand from people with disability what was happening to them when they were engaging with the justice system, right? So this initiative is a person-centered approach, and that was fundamental for us to work with persons with disability, talk to them, legally represent them, understand what was the answer from the justice system. And then, obviously, we needed the support of the justice system. This wouldn't work without that support, right? We're introducing a new figure into the justice system. So we knocked many, many doors, I have to say, for many years. And finally, it was not the prosecutor office, not the public defense office, it was the courts who decided to launch this project. So raising that awareness, and what was very interesting for us was that the authorities didn't see the problem because they didn't have the solution. Once we provide the solution, then they understood they had a problem. So sometimes you have to build those solutions so we can respond to the challenges faced by the justice system, right? And regarding the challenges that we face as an organization, I have to say that the main challenges was sustainability, right? We're a small organization in Mexico City, and we started, voluntarily going to these criminal hearings, training justice facilitators, and since day one, we were wondering and trying to strategize how are we going to sustain this project. And it was very interesting because for the system and the justice system, the judges, it was very clear that we were providing a system for them, a support for them, not for persons with disability, but for the system. We were allowing them to make the system accessible for persons who have been historically marginalized and silenced, right? So it was the judges who actually say, okay, you're providing a service for us, as well as sign language interpreters do, as translators do. We're providing us services, and we're going to support on that. So we sign an agreement with the courtrooms, and actually it's the courtroom that pays now justice facilitators. So that was huge for us because that allowed for the sustainability of the project.
All right, thank you. Please.
Yeah, so I think the most innovative thing that we did was the technology solution. I really credit the early success to just my co-founder's lived personal experience and looking at a particularly legal issue like asylum and understanding that it's not just enough to have a free attorney, but LGBTQ people need access to other affirming critical services. And then my own personal experience understanding that other LGBTQ people could also benefit from the tech platform that we first started, specifically for LGBTQ asylum seekers. In terms of challenge, I would just say starting the organization. It's very difficult. I actually ran it for 5 years as a volunteer before I was able to hire myself. In the United States, only 4 cents of every $100 from a US foundation goes to the trans communities. So it really was a struggle to kind of push fundraising and make people understand that LGBTQ people fleeing persecution and other LGBTQ people in need of safe resources deserve their own tailored tech platform. But I'm happy to say that we did it.
Great. Those were each excellent answers. Next question, get a response from each of you. What advice would you give to other change makers, a different project, who might want to implement something similar to what you're doing in a new location, in a new country? What would you suggest based on the experience that you've had?
First of all, I will insist on the power of data to prove, to document the trends that we can see is very important, because then it is very obvious what we represent in front of the authorities and is already proved. So nobody can say, I don't know anymore. So everybody has to sit on the table and discuss about the needed solutions. Also, as I said before, inclusiveness and coordination. Regardless if we are part of a network, of an umbrella or not, at the end of the day, we are representatives of civil society organizations. We represent vulnerable groups, targeted communities. So to be coordinated, to collaborate, to have in mind inclusiveness in our steps is very important in order to become more and more effective. Thank you.
I would add on. So I made a switch from the corporate to the development sector. I would say if you're starting out, pick a cause that you're really passionate about. Because once you commit to it, you can't give up halfway. And everybody looks at social media and you always post your success. Nobody really knows the hard work that goes behind it. So you should still feel passionate at your lowest moments. To what Jamie said, here it's very difficult to raise money. For whatever reason, in India, the government is making it really difficult for nonprofits to survive. So you have to think of your own nest egg so that you are financially sufficient in order to do this work, and think of more sustainable ways of earning your income. So 40% of our budgets come from earned revenue. And the last one is none of these issues are solvable by one organization. They are too big, they are too complex. So partnerships, collaboration is absolutely necessary. And last, put the person who you're serving at the center of your solution. Get their feedback. When we say empower them, like for us, they decide what the data, how to use the data in their community. We are just the facilitator. So put them at the center, give them the tools that they can use to make their lives better. Thank you.
Yeah, yes. I would like to add here that first, the team. We need a teamwork who can understand the problem, because if you don't understand the problem, you cannot solve others. So at the COVID time, it was everyone is in Nepal were afraid. Oh, I will go to out the home. I will be affected. Even the family members. But that time, what tool we use? I just want to add here. We encourage our staff, including me, that we cannot change at the total system at this point, but our small attempt make a person total life change, so that we convince them and we able to work together. So teamwork is the one thing we need to think. Another point I would like to add here that evidence-based approach or pact, or we can say that if we have evidence to show that this is the problem with the system, then that will work. That because the evidence can use in the several way. So that is I would like to hear. Third, I would suggest that definitely network and collaboration with the other organization at the local level, at the national level, at regional level, and international level. It is also required to address those issues. So these are the things I would like to suggest.
Great, thank you.
I would say that we're here because we all have questions, right? And we're all looking at a problem and trying to answer and find some answers, some solutions. So I think we have to realize that someone else is asking the same question. And for us, it was really clear that someone else was working around the world around access to justice for persons with disability, and having the possibility to connect with them and to share our questions and build an answer together was fundamental. So I think that part of the job, looking for best practices around the world is very, very important, and I think this space is great for that. And also, I would say in terms of justice facilitator, I would say you should hire us, or not hire us, but we've walked the road from zero, and we're eager to share what we've learned. So please get in touch.
Great.
Yeah, I would just add looking for gaps, so doing the competitive landscape or research in the early stages to look at kind of like what the other panelists were saying about what already exists and trying not to recreate the wheel, I think is really, really important, and ultimately will lead to more successful and fundraising endeavors in the future.
Great. Third question is a bit more difficult, and it's a hypothetical. Let's assume that somewhere in this lovely audience this morning is a major international foundation, a Bill Gates or somebody like that, who falls in love with your project in a significant monetary way. What would you do next? How would you change? How would you build? What would be your next step?
Okay, normally I would try to reply with one activity, but since we have such a huge donor in our, okay, I will be generous and optimistic. So, our next steps for RVRN. Of course, we will continue advocating the Greek authorities to establish an effective national system for supporting hate crime victims and providing protection to them. They already established, as we said before, a data collection system. So now it's the time to go to the next step, and particularly to start implementing the relevant EU directive. And this is fully cost-effective. So I will go to the second aim, the second objective, which is, as I said before, to overcome the challenges of the underfunding that we face in terms of the provision of services by the civil society organizations. So we, for sure, would support our RVRN members in order to continue providing their services, especially to the victims who are extremely vulnerable, meaning the victims that meet the intersectionality indicator. And the third one, you said that, you asked, so I will continue. The third one concerns the fact that we would like eventually to expand our methodology on hate speech also. Because as we understand, hate speech, hate crime are strongly connected, and particularly hate speech could create the environment in which we could see the increase of hate crime. So it's very important to be proactive, to go back one step and start monitoring closely also this indicator. Thank you.
We're already present in 10 countries with partners, and what I'd like to do is go deep, because We have colleges and schools that are not safe. We have public spaces and transport that is not safe. And we have institutions that don't really have the data to understand the full nature and scope of the problem. So I would use the money to really double down with our partners and of course my team in India to get all the data. We are setting up a research institute as well to understand the nuances of sexual harassment, because we think we know it, but actually we don't. And the people in power do not necessarily have these lived experiences. So the more data we generate and the more correlations and causations we can show them, then they would design policies, laws, systems that are effective. So that's what I would do.
I will continue the work we are doing. That means the data collection, legal representation, communication with the communities to make them always aware about their rights, how these are going. Because rights are never rights will be end. And there is no we can say that there is no deadline that your right is going to be stopped here. So these are the ongoing things. So we need to communicate forever. Sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, the child is the future of the nation. So that we have to set a mind change that a child and the young people cannot be treated as the same way, because child do the wrong, not the crime. So if you do the wrong, then you have to communicate and make them schooling to improve their behavior. That is going to that. At the same time, we would like to continue our lobbying with the government in national level to accomplish the discriminatory law against the child, and regional level, so that it's not, I think, not a problem in the Nepal, but I think it's in the Asia or worldwide, it's a problem. Even in the not failure to pay the bail is in some countries is going to be a jail. So we need to continue lobbying with the regional levels to think on this way.
So we are convinced that justice facilitators are an innovative, low-cost, replicable solution for the justice system to ensure access to justice. And we will spend that money in mainstreaming justice facilitators all over the world. So we would create, I think, a training platform where people who are interested in justice facilitators could train. And we could also create like a mentorship program where we could support those programs all over the world and tell them, as I said before, to walk the road with them, right? So we would spend there the money.
Yeah, as I briefly mentioned in the presentation, we would use the money to support the rebranding from Assam Connect to Inreach, specifically to improve the free tech platform, such as adding new native translations to improve accessibility, adding new search filtering, and catering to really specific community needs, so making sure the platform is helpful and accessible as possible for, let's say, like a cisgender gay man seeking asylum from Russia, but also for a trans woman from Nigeria who might come into the country undocumented. That diversity is extremely important, and with more funding, we can expedite the technical development that's necessary to improve the user experience and make sure that every member of the LGBTQ community, no matter where you are on the acronym or what your immigration status is, feels confident using our platform and finds the safe help that they need to thrive.
I noticed that after my last question, each of our 5 panelists was looking off across the audience to try to figure out which one of you was the major donor coming up. Would like now to open questions to the audience, if you have any, if we have time. Okay. Gentleman in the back, please. We'll get you a microphone.
Hi. Hi, my name is Dieter from UNDP in Pakistan, and I actually have a question to the colleague from Mexico. The justice facilitators, what legal status do they have? Because that is a concept we would like to, or we were thinking about in Pakistan. But of course, in procedural codes, it's pretty fixed. So I would be interested how you accommodated that institute into the praxis. Thank you.
Please.
So at least, in Mexico, we ratified the UN Convention on the Persons with Disability, right? So we have, the justice system has the obligation and the international obligation to implement procedural accommodations. So that's one bit of it. But in the National Criminal Procedural Code, that's a figure that's called Auxiliaries of Justice, and it's very vague. So, for example, you have a forensic psychiatrist, a forensic psychologist, you have a language interpretation, a translator. All of them participate and help the justice system be accessible in certain ways under witness experts. So I think the justice facilitator, at least for Mexico, that was a way to introduce this figure. It's a vague figure, but that helps a lot. I don't know if that answers the question. That's in the Criminal Procedural Code. Yeah.
Sure. Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Alyssa Green. I'm a student from the University of Houston. And I actually run a community service project for public speaking for young girls and self-advocacy. And as a smaller project that's trying to expand ourselves, the first question I have for anybody to answer is, how do you grow like a small project such as that? We are community-based, but we're looking obviously to expand. And then my second question is, a lot of the problems that you all address are multifaceted in many ways. And especially as a project that, for me, is a smaller one, because it's a multifaceted issue, we often find ourselves spreading ourselves thin, trying to address all the problems. So how do you mitigate that? And what is your solution to those problems?
Who would, yes, please.
I can go. So first, narrow down what you really are focused on. See, women's rights is a huge topic. We have zoned in on sexual and gender-based violence prevention. So even our workshops are all about that. So just go very narrow, and then it addresses your first question, because then you are a value add to partners who may not offer services in that very niche area.
Okay, as I said, we started in 2011 with 18 civil society organizations. Today we are proud having 52 under the umbrella of RVRN. Let me tell you that it was from the civil society organizations side that colleagues went to UNHCR in Greece, in the Greek National Commission for Human Rights, and start alerting them about the hate crime incidents, because they start receiving in their services the victims requesting medical support, psychosocial support. So the civil society in Greece was already alerted about the phenomenon, and since the two coordinators, with their collaboration, starting establishing the system starting being, through the publicity of the annual reports, being more and more known, and at the end of the day, it was again the civil society organizations that started coming to RVRN and asking to be part of RVRN. So I think that the fact that we publish what we see, we document and we publish what we see, and we insisting on having direct communication with the targeted community, helped us to have more members and to expand our monitoring in national-wise in Greece. Sorry, the second question, I think that you had a second part, right?
It's about like multifaceted problems as well, because you go into the community and oftentimes you figure out that it's not just one thing, it's a lot of things that contribute to the issue. So how do you go about that?
As I said, we have a continuous communication dialogue with the target communities. If you visit our sites, you will realize that the targeted communities are part of RVRN, so the communication is already established.
Right.
Thank you.
I'm afraid we've run out of time. I want to remind everyone to attend the World Justice Challenge Awards ceremony. It's tomorrow at 4:15, where one of Equal Rights and Non-Discrimination Projects will win a $20,000 prize. I find these 5 particular projects especially inspiring, and I hope you do too. They are solving real problems and helping to create a stronger rule of law in all of our communities. So please join me in thanking them for their presentations today. Great. Wonderful, folks. Thank you. Yeah.